Hi, I'm Paul Peterson.
And I'm Danny Banks. So, Paul, America is an exceptional nation with a unique history and a unique government, but what's unique about the way the United States governs its schools?
Well, that's also pretty unique. It's very different from the countries in Europe. Our schools are locally controlled by locally chosen public officials. In hardly any other country do we find an educational system controlled by local communities. Local districts are a basic part of the American political heritage. And some people think that's a good thing, and other people think that's the problem.
All that's fascinating, but let's begin with some of the basic facts. What's a school district?
Well, school districts are units of local government with the authority to spend money, hire teachers, principals, superintendents, and other personnel. Most have the authority to collect taxes, though some districts must ask their local government for funds to run their schools. In most cases, school districts are separate and distinct from local government, but in some places the school district and the municipal government are one and the same, with a separate local school committee.
You said that education is locally controlled. Who governs the school district?
Well, usually it's an elected official. 90% of school boards in the United States are elected officials, and the school committee is usually part of municipal government, which is elected. So one way or another, it's the voters who pick the people who run the schools.
And are local school districts independent of state governments?
Well, no, any state can totally abolish every school district in the state if it wants to. And actually, many school districts have been abolished by the state. And so local districts operate at the sufferance of the state government, but traditionally, local school districts have a lot of autonomy.
Where do school districts and school boards come from? How did we get this kind of education system?
Well, we got it from England and Scotland. Both countries were a byproduct of the Protestant Reformation, and they believed that everybody should read the Bible, and in order to read the Bible, you had to learn how to read. So they set up schools in local communities, and when the people from England and Scotland came to the United States, they set up a similar system here in the colonial period.
So what were some of the characteristics of these early schools?
Well, they were voluntary. Nobody had to go to school. They were fee-based. You paid if you did go to school. They were locally controlled by the ministers of the local congregations, because most of these schools were affiliated with one religion or another, usually the Pilgrims and the Congregational Church as we know it today.
Were these schools mainly for the well-to-do?
Well, of course, every school system in the world has first served the well-to-do and the people with more resources. But it was amazingly democratic for all of that, because we know from surveys that were done during the colonial period that nearly 90% of men could write their own name, and that 60 to 90% of all women could do the same. It was said that 100,000 people read the book Common Sense, the revolutionary pamphlet that was written by Thomas Paine that did so much to foment the revolution. And many people said that without widespread literacy and the proliferation of newspapers, the American Revolution could never have happened. America's educational success was internationally known. In fact, when Alexis de Tocqueville came to America in the early 1830s, he reported ecstatically on the U.S. educational system. What he said was, "In no country in the world do the citizens make such exertions for the common weal. I know of no people who have established schools so numerous and efficacious." So by the early part of the 19th century, it's pretty clear that people found that the American educational system was well established, extensive, and democratic.
So with all of this success, did other countries follow the United States' lead and establish locally controlled school boards and school districts?
Well, by and large, they did not. The dominant model in education is what might be called the Prussian model, an educational system controlled by the state or national government. Germany was the first country to have a fully developed public school system.
So did any elements from the Prussian model come to the United States?
Well, yes, in some ways we have a mix of the Scottish system or the English system that we first discussed and the Prussian system. And the force that produced this combination was none other than the person known as the great American educator, Horace Mann.
Who was Horace Mann, and why was he so committed to the public school?
Well, Horace Mann was elected to the state legislature in Massachusetts in the 1830s. That was a time when Boston was facing a massive in-migration of immigrants from Ireland and from Italy and from other parts of Europe. So Horace Mann became the spokesman for the Protestant fear of Catholic immigrants. Let's see exactly why he was such an effective spokesman by going to his hometown of Franklin, Massachusetts. I am in Franklin, Massachusetts, a town near the farm where Horace Mann was raised as a child. This is the oldest continuously operating schoolhouse in the United States, one-room schoolhouse. And it is still being used today by the Benjamin Franklin Charter School. It's a fitting place to discuss the life and times of Horace Mann. Horace Mann shared the general view of Protestant society about Catholicism. It was controlled by the Pope, and they feared popish influences in the United States. But Horace Mann had a deeper concern. As a child, he had attended religious services that the hometown minister used as a platform for preaching fire and brimstone sermons. And those sermons struck fear into the hearts of this young lad as he took them so literally. It broke his faith in a loving God. And then one day he had a religious experience, not unlike the experiences of those who say they have been born again. Let's see what he actually said. I remember the day, the hour, the place, and the circumstances, as well as though the event had happened but yesterday, when in agony of despair I broke the spell that bound me. After this religious experience, Horace Mann rejected Calvinism in favor of a Christian ethics and doctrine not unlike the Unitarian Church that he later joined. But he still had the zeal of a missionary. Yet his pulpit was a schoolhouse. His mission was launched from public office, and his target was not sin, but the twin errors of orthodoxy and Catholicism. And from that religious commitment, Horace Mann launched public education in America.
Where did Mann get his reform ideas?
Well, he went to Prussia. And that's where we get the mixture of the Prussian and the English-Scottish systems. Mann toured Germany. He discovered that the Prussian leaders who were unifying Germany were coming up with new ways of directing the schools. They created a common curriculum. They collected statistical information on what was going on locally, and they developed professional cadres to design schools that had a common language, formed a common identity transcending the Protestant-Catholic divide in Germany.
With all these ideas, how did Mann get the power to enact his reforms?
Well, let's go by the Massachusetts State House to see where Mann put his ideas into operation. I'm standing on the steps of the State House of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts here in Boston, the place where Horace Mann persuaded his fellow legislators to pass a law creating a Board of Education for the entire Commonwealth, the state of Massachusetts. He became the first secretary of the board, and from that perch, he pursued his agenda. His agenda could not be the comprehensive Prussian educational system that he so much admired. Local control was too powerful in the United States for that to happen. So he pursued a lesser, four-pronged agenda. One, compulsory education for students to attend public schools. Two, teacher education in state-approved schools to make sure that religious orthodoxy was not being taught to the teachers. Three, state-approved textbooks that also eliminated orthodox religious opinions. And finally, statistics, the gathering of statistics by the state to make sure that local boards were following the state expectations.
Were there any oppositions to his reforms in the state legislature?
Yes, indeed. There was a strong committee there that tried to undermine what he was doing. Here's what they said. Instead of consolidating the education interest of the Commonwealth in one grand central head, that is in the power of Horace Mann, and that head the government, let us rather hold on to the good old principles of our ancestors and diffuse and scatter this interest into towns and districts, even into families and individuals. Otherwise, it's farewell to religious liberty, for there would be but one church. So they were trying to protect those local school boards.
So who won the battle, Mann and his local school board or his local school board opponents?
Well, as usual in America, it's a compromise. Neither side got everything they wanted. Those school boards continued to have a lot of autonomy, a lot of influence, but Horace Mann did get teachers educated at normal schools. That institution was created all across the country, and we still have normal schools now called state universities that are providing teacher education. And it is also the case that he got state approval of textbooks to be the standard in many of the states. So there is now shared power between the state government and the local school board. This Prussian system manifests itself in the powers of state governments, and the English-Scottish system continues down to the present through our local school boards still being a big power center in American education.
Did our educational system prosper under local control?
Well, the proof is in the pudding. We have the best educated country in the world by the end of the 19th century. No other country is able to expand its elementary schools because every little community wanted elementary school because the other communities had that. And communities started building high schools because other communities were building them. And we had our battles over religion, but they were settled locally with the balance of power at the local level deciding who was going to win. In Europe, they fought all these battles out at the national level, and it was a struggle that went on and on and on and never got decided until way well into the 20th century. So in the meantime, the United States builds a solid base for a very strong and prosperous country and a well-educated population.
Is that the way that the school system in America developed throughout the 19th century?
It takes all of the 19th century and well into the 20th century to create all of the pieces. But nonetheless, it was quite an accomplishment.